じゃあ、お互い自己紹介お願いします。
はじめまして。彼女はアレックスです。
私の彼氏、彼氏です。
どうぞよろしくお
どうぞ
願いし
よろしくお願いし
ます。
ます。
どうぞよろしくお願いします。アレックスさんとカーティスさん、お仕事何してるんですか？
彼さんの仕事はグラフィックデザインです。
アレックスちゃんの仕事はタトゥー師です。
そうですか。
僕らワンちゃんとニャンちゃんとトカゲとかちゃん飼っています。
うん、
JOF の学生。
そうですか。日本に来るってことですが、日本のどこに行きたいですか？
東京とか京都とか奈良行きたいです。
アレックスさんはどこに行きたいですか？
大阪とか北海道行きたいです。
日本で何がしたいですか、カーティスさ
毎日たくさん日本の料理食べたいです。ラーメンとか、たこ焼きとか、和牛とか、餅とか、梅干
ん。うん。
しとかで。
いいですね。たくさん食べたいのありますね。アレックスさんは？
日本のウイスキーとかビール飲みたいです。
うん。
ガチガチャしたいです。
いいですね。ガチャガチャおもちゃが出てくるやつですね。じゃあ、日本で何が見たいですか？
大阪の汁の庭みたいです。
いいですね。アレックスさんは？
あと、ギャラリーみたいです。
いいですね。
日本行くの楽しみです。
私も。
日本語自信ついたのだ。
う
ありがとう。
ん。
以上です。
はい、ありがとうございました。Welcome to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining, Curtis and then Alex. So tell me about you guys and where you living now.
We live in California.
Especially here in Japan Language Factory, a lot of people actually want to learn Japanese. Simply, what is actually the reason you are interested in learning Japanese?
For since high school on and off, I've taken Japanese classes. I took some in college. I did a short exchange there in high school and, just wanting to practice and get better. I've done a lot of traveling and I've always wanted to be able to like really speak the language of like where I'm visiting. And the closest one to speaking was Japanese, but I just kind of was always learning like educational style of it. And it was like
Mm.
very formal and like I always get caught up on like, oh, is this the right like te form or lu form or the adjectives and all these things. And I felt like I kind of always like hit a plateau of like actually speaking and I'd be able to like read and write stuff. But when it came to speaking, I would like overthink and I wasn't doing enough like speaking practice. So that communication wasn't really there. And I just wanted to get better at that because, when we go back and visit Japan or spend time there, I want to actually be able to communicate and talk to people and not be able to just kind of read and write, but not be comfortable speaking with people and also be able to speak with them not overly formal and there, where it almost sounds like I'm speaking Japanese as a robot or a Google Translate version. So
I see, I see. Google translation version of robots. So yeah, that's actually really funny way to describe it. So it's actually really reality. Like, and so what about Alex? Why you're interested in learning Japanese?
I'm half Japanese, so my mom is Japanese and she doesn't speak the language. My grandma and my aunties spoke the language, but they didn't really like teach it to us. It was just kind of like casual, like here and there. But I've always wanted to learn and like become fluent eventually so that I could go to Japan and kind of like reconnect with that part of my culture. And then, like Curtis, I want to be able to go and like get to know people and like have actual conversations and like not just kind of like have like casual surface level and like get by kind of conversations. Like I also want to get to know people and then possibly work there in the future. That would be crazy.
Oh, I see. Oh, that's amazing. All right. So a lot of people go to Japan for traveling, but most of people don't learn Japanese. They just figure out with the Google Translate. And then there are too many options in 2024. People can learn with the Duolingo. Maybe they buy textbook. They just watching Japanese anime all day long, try to pick up some word. But at some point, you are not feeling like speaking naturally. Like you're not understanding what they're saying, or you cannot feel like you're speaking naturally. So what was the most difficult part for you that you couldn't feel more progress faster?
Besides kanji? Yeah, I think from the textbooks, like I was even studying for the JLPTN5, and it's very much like school kind of study focus. Like you're more so like memorizing your verbs and your adjectives and the conjugation forms of those verbs. So like you're trying to think about so much and like, oh, like particle ga versus de versus ni and like how you put it. And so when in my experience, like there's so much other information that it's trying to teach you about like the technical grammar of Japanese that it's like you almost forget to learn the language of Japanese. Like you're studying vocab, how to conjugate it correctly, all the different stuff, and then you're just kind of memorizing those things but not really learning in the sense of how you would speak. So then you go to speak, and for me it was almost like paralyzing because I was like overthinking, which particle do I put here? Do I use masen or do I use janai form? Do I use like all these different things instead of just focusing on like, am I saying like like am I even communicating it right? And all that stuff is like super, not just like formal, but like it's almost like too many words. Like no one speaks like that. And as I've been and taken this course and even just learning, it makes total sense, like compared to even English. Like there's so many things that if you study like English grammar, no one speaks that way with the sentence. No one keeps mentioning the thing they're talking about in the sentence, right? There's the type of human communication format that's like implied, right? Like we're talking, it's shorthand, we shorten words. Words now have this meaning. We have phrases that, if you try to directly translate would not work, right? And the only way you could ever learn those things is like having someone who speaks Japanese regularly to practice with.
Amazing. Yeah, you really actually experienced. I'm sure you had a kind of different experience from Curtis, which is like more pressured by sometimes society, like, oh, you must be fluent in Japanese, you're half Japanese, or but it's in reality, it's different. It's you really need to have a certain training. It's not something about DNA. Okay, you have Japanese blood, you can speak Japanese. It's not like that. So what about your experience of learning?
I've definitely been asked a lot if I could speak it, and then I always felt really bad when I said no. But I tried to take it once in high school, and I took it every year in high school. I didn't retain any of it. And I think it also showed me the difference between like learning in a classroom environment or like trying to teach myself versus having this like one-on-one training. And the one-on-one training is like makes such a difference with the way that my brain works. And like with the way that my brain works, like doing it in like a big class, trying to like teach myself or like even like trying to teach myself with certain texts here, like Curtis said, it just like I'm learning now that there are certain things that I need to unlearn because I was learning it incorrectly. And then it's actually like we're learning now that like, oh, like saying it this way is actually rude, when like trying to learn something in order not to come off rude and to be like as polite as possible. And then it's actually the opposite. But yeah, the one-on-one classes though, and then, or also I feel like the one-on-one classes, but then also having like a buddy has been so nice.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So one last request is the majority of people is they're thinking of learning, but they're not making progress. That's really normal. Like Curtis before, like thinking of learning Japanese, but the reality not making really progress. Like I'm not even going to Japan. My friend is not increasing learning, but it's not really making progress. So what is going to be the advice?
If you haven't signed up for Japan Language Factory, that would be a major helpful one to focus more on comfortability of speaking and saying stuff and making mistakes and kind of approaching it. You talk about with the child's view of approaching like language learning, like, kids when they're learning a language are just throwing words out there. Stuff might not work, but like it's not about getting it wrong. It's about like learning what was wrong and trying again and understanding. If you just never speak, like you just won't even make the connection between brain and mouth. And so just focusing more on just speaking out loud and using the language for real and not just in your head without speaking, kind of silently doing a workbook or something. Like it's all about actually vocalizing and practicing and repetition. I've even found in other ways now with doing this, when I'm reviewing or reading other Japanese stuff, like I say it a lot more than I ever have before. Like before it was a lot of like, oh, read this in my head, think about it, and then write or that. But even now when I read stuff, I'm saying it actually out loud a lot more. And it's because I'm just feeling more confident in it and it feels more comfortable and words flow way better. And I don't get caught up on certain letter pairings or like ways that you need to stop, or like the flow of the sentence is less like da, 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 da. It's more just, you know, like saying it together. I'm not reading, kind of like sounding it out in my head. And that's all just from like actually speaking and not just like learning in my head. Learning like by doing is the most helpful thing that I found through this.
Thank you, Curtis. And then what about Alex? Do you have any advice to them?
Definitely sign up, because I feel like the idea of learning a language, like the idea of learning Japanese for me was always like, it was always a goal, but I think I didn't think it was like an actual realistic goal for me, just because I had tried before and I had also tried with like different languages, and like I chopped it up to like, oh, my brain's just not built that way. Like my brain's not built to retain like another language. But then learning it this way, like through these classes, it felt like it, like I said before, that there was like a breakthrough moment. Because at first I think it was always fun, but I think I was a little intimidated because I had built that up in my head. And then there was like a breakthrough moment in the beginning of like, oh, okay, like I'm remembering this, like not just remembering it, like memorizing lines or anything, but there would be times like whether we were going back and forth or like just going back and forth during the class where like I actually like knew what was happening. Like I felt caught up, like I didn't feel behind or anything. And then I think that was the beginning of that breakthrough feeling of like, oh, this is like possible. Like this, like I feel like I can actually do this. But yeah, so if I guess if anybody feels like they've tried and maybe like learning language is just like not in their cards, then trying like these one-on-one classes, because it definitely makes a difference.
Yeah, thank you so much, Curtis and Alex. Please update your goal, step by step. You're gonna definitely achieve, and then please join this YouTube channel again when you actually have a next goal or next actual achievement. All right, thank you so much, Curtis and Alex.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.